tell, it's got tremendous pagan roots. That's really what this is. It is an ancient pagan hymn to the spring. Ooh, I just got chicken skin on this. So just take that in and feel that this morning. That there is an ancient presence that has been speaking to humanity forever through the world. And it is saying over and over again that life is eternal, life is renewed, and it is blessed in its cycles. There are cycles of light and then cycles of dark. And each is beautiful and magnificent. And so in the ancient world, there were many ceremonies to welcome in the light. And it wasn't just the early spring, but there is this later spring celebration that happens all over the world. Passover is an ancient celebration, and it falls on the first Sabbath after the full moon following the equinox. And of course, our Easter is the first Sunday after Passover. So what was that all about in the ancient world? Well, I think in the Near East, and remember that the Near East includes and the ziggurats of that part of the world, the Tigris Euphrates, that golden crescent of the earliest civilizations, and Egypt. I'm lumping these guys all in together. And they had their renewal ceremonies and their renewal beliefs that then got transferred over to Judaism and actually became very patriarchal. But prior to that, there was the descent of Inanna into the underworld, where she was ripped asunder and then reborn anew. Chicken skin day. Magnificent ceremonies in the ancient world about the changing, the cycles of life, the death and the rebirth, that this form, whatever form we're in, dies, but is reborn. And then we move to Egypt, and we have the ancient cycle of Isis and Osiris. And in this myth, it's really awesome because it's male and female balanced. And the male side is the one that gets ripped asunder. And apparently Osiris, the story goes, his body was ripped asunder and placed in all these locations around the world. And it was Isis's task to find all the pieces of Osiris and bring them back, which she did. And when they were all aligned, he wasn't reborn. But what happened was, she actually, I don't know how to say this, she had sex with his corpse. And Horus, the godchild, was born. And that's how that happened. Now, we move these ancient myths, these ancient rituals of the Near East over to Israel, the chosen people. And they've got their stories of Passover and how they, in a sense, were ripped asunder as a people because they had been captured and taken into bondage in Egypt. And then Moses gets the word from God and the angel of the Lord and has everybody do this migration to the promised land. And so there's the coming together again of a people this time. So we went from Inanna to Isis Osiris, and now we move to Moses and the children of Israel. And then this story kind of morphs, and it becomes the myth of Mithras, which is an ancient precursor to Jesus. So much of the Mithraic myth is brought into the story of Jesus. The blood of the bull, actually, because there was a sacrifice for Mithras. And the person was bathed in the blood of the lamb, now we have the blood of the bull, and that brought a savior principle. That actually happened to be one of the most predominant cults of the soldiers of Rome. And so we come to the Roman occupation in Israel. And there's a whole bunch of myths I'm leaving out in the Near East, and I'm only going over the Near East. Trust me when I say these myths had their cycle all over the world. Whether it's the cycle of the corn maiden, etc. We have them all over the world. So here we are, occupied, and now we get the Jesus story. And the Jesus story takes bits of Osiris and Isis, and bits of the Mithras story, and there's a couple of other really profound ancient cults of death and renewal that were also told that get captured inside our stories about Jesus. Here's what's so cool about the Jesus story. It's no longer a whole group of people. It's your own individual soul that becomes one with God, the Son of God. Fascinating to know that the Bible we have used and the form of Christianity most of us were brought up in and followed was actually created by a political regime in 325. The year 325 in Constantinople, which became the Holy Roman Empire. It was the seat of the Holy Roman Empire. And Constantine was a great warrior king. And he was conquering all this territory. And apparently he kept running into some bad luck and not winning. So he said, you know, I'll bow to this new Christian God if you let me win this war. He won the war, converted to Christianity, and then held a whole bunch of councils in Constantinople, which was of course named after him, to go over what was going to be our official doctrine. And it was very political. So what was removed were all the gospels that empowered you individually to find the God within. What was removed was also the gospel of Mary and the truth of who Mary Magdalene was. And when did we find these? In 1945, right after World War II ended, right after the atomic bomb. Now, I don't think that's an accident. These scrolls had been hidden for over 2,000 years. Found in the desert in northern Africa. They're known as the Nag Hammadi scriptures. Simultaneously, the Dead Sea Scrolls were found in Qumran, which is now in Gaza. And thank goodness they were found before Gaza happened. And what did they discover? Mirrors of the Nag Hammadi, almost exact. And so ancient groups who were not going to follow the official Christian church took those gospels and retreated to secret places so that they could continue the practices. Because if you were a heretic, if you didn't join what the political powers now said you needed to do to be saved and to be a Christian, well, we know what happened to heretics back in those days, and it wasn't good. So these things were saved. And this is about, and why did it happen after the atomic bomb? Anybody got some ideas about that? Why they would have been found then? I can tell you why. This is my belief. You probably are thinking about it, coming up with what you think is true. Probably none of us are probably 100% right, and altogether we probably would get close. But it's my sense of it that after that bomb, we needed to get empowered personally and know the truth of our being, or we were going to, as a collective, destroy each other. And that plutonian energy of the atomic bomb was unleashed on the world, which says, first off, the plutonian energy is always about power, and it's if you don't get a hold of your own personal power, somebody else will. So it behooves each one of us now to empower ourselves to step into the light. But here's something else I want to tell you about all these stories that happen at Easter time, at this time of the year. Because there's another really beautiful ancient myth that went on for probably 4,000 years in Greece. And it's the story of Demeter and Persephone and the god Hades. And the reason I bring up that story is because it encapsulates some of the key components of all of these stories. Demeter is the goddess. She creates life on earth, the good weather, the growing plants. Her symbol is the sheaf of wheat. And remember, the human beings came out of being nomads when they started to create their own gardens, and they started to produce wheat, and they had a collective, and it was called the Neolithic Revolution. And the Neolithic Revolution happened between 10,000 years ago and 5,000 years ago. And so I believe the story of Demeter, who is the goddess of wheat, is that old, at least. And she had a daughter. Her daughter is Persephone, the goddess of spring. This magnificent, beautiful young woman. And Demeter gave her a task. Out upon the earth, find all the flowers which have no color, apparently, and you must color in each flower. And so think about this. This is when humanity is just developing how to name the plants, how to differentiate them, what to do with them, how to be with them. And so what a great symbol. She colors all of the flowers. But before she completes her task, Hades, who is the god of death, who resides in the underworld, and by the way, is also Pluto. When we move this myth to the Romans, Hades becomes Pluto. Plutonian, power again, think about this. Steals her in his chariot and takes her down to the underworld and makes her marry him. The god of death wants the beauty of spring ever in his heart. What happens with Demeter? Well, there's some interesting stories about the goddess. Now, the goddess is known to be the most creative, loving, producing, incredibly beneficent presence on the planet. But guess what? She's also got a dark side. And that dark side can be really mean. All of a sudden, she pleads with Zeus, she pleads with the gods to make Hades bring Persephone back. He refuses. Nah, let the god have it. What the heck? I'll show you. Here's how she got me. The first winter descended upon the earth. All the plants stopped growing. People started starving. And that meant that the offerings to Zeus were no longer happening. Now Demeter goes back to Zeus and says, give me my daughter back from Hades. And he got a lot of pressure from all the gods. He had to say, okay. However, there was one caveat. In the underworld, and this is important for all of us, when you get into the underworld of your own personal life, if you eat the food of the underworld, you cannot return. And Hades had tricked Persephone. And she had eaten 6 pomegranate seeds. The pomegranate in the ancient world was the symbol of total fertility. Just think of all those seeds producing a new tree. She had 6 of those. So Zeus said, I'm sorry. She can only come back for 6 months out of the year, because the other 6 months she has to return to the underworld. And so that's how we got summer and winter in the ancient world. That was the story. But here's what I want to say about this, why this is so important to our story, to the Christian myth. It's that all of these stories relate to an archetype. And what is an archetype? An archetype is a motif or a pattern or a symbol that repeats in humankind over and over again because it's an essential truth. And so here's the story of the descent. And you could say that each one of us has descended into this life by incarnating. This is the descent. And we're cut off from our oneness with Source and our oneness with each other, and we think we're separate and alone in this little person. That is the descent. And then the journey to find our missing pieces, the journey to discover our own power and individuality and our oneness with that presence. That's the hero's journey that we're all on. And that is where we're bringing all the pieces of ourselves back together again. And then the next part is the ascent, the coming back to the fullness and the truth of who we are. Now, I left Buddha out of this for a while because the story of Buddha in many ways is like the story of Jesus. It's about individual empowerment on the ascent. And you know, the Jesus story is really about the ascent. It is moving into your spiritual reality, the truth of your being. One of the things Ernest Holmes did is, in his deep love for Jesus and the Christ, he wrote a whole chapter in what we call the textbook called Finding the Christ. And he opens the chapter by reminding us all that Jesus is not the only begotten Son. He quotes Meister Eckhart, a beautiful mystic in the 14th century, beautiful Christian mystic, who said, the only God is forever begetting the begotten Son, meaning us. And that means that creation is always happening, it's ongoing, and that Christ presence dwells within each of us. It's the truth of who we are. And Buddha said the same thing, that we are a Buddha inside. And to find that awareness, the jewel in the lotus, each one of the chakras is seen as a lotus. Because when they actually visualize it in psychic vision, which I have not done, but as I understand this is how it's reported, it appears as like a flower with petals. So they call it the lotus. And what is the jewel in the lotus? It's our consciousness. It's the presence of the One. And that's the same in each one of us. So Buddha came to bring the story of individual ascent, of moving into the light, of knowing the truth of your being, of becoming fully aware of that. And in many ways, this was the story of Jesus as well. Captured by political powers in the old Roman Empire and changed. But nevertheless, that's the story. It's not, this is my feeling, it's not that he's our personal savior. It's that he shows us the way we save ourselves, that we are saved, we move into the light. Great avatar, great teacher, great incarnation of the One Presence. Born knowing who he was. Extraordinary teacher. And so now we come full circle to what truly is Easter? all about for us. Because today, many of us are spiritual travelers, in a sense. We're spiritual nomads, in a sense. We've studied so much. We've tasted this, and we've gone to a Tibetan retreat. We've danced with the Hopis and the Kachinas in New Mexico. You know, there's so much that all of us have done together that we're ready now. We're ready now to recognize the truth of our humanity and the truth of our journey. That we descend into individual consciousness, we find our way, we find our soul, and then we begin to make the ascent into our oneness with the truth and with all that is. And so that's the meaning of Easter. You know, this symbol of the wheat represents that full cycle of life. So here is the fruit, the wheat, and then it becomes bread. And those symbols are so much in the Bible about the bread. It's bringing in the story of the wheat. But the wheat is harvested, chopped down. Now outside my window, I live in Cslwh village, and outside my window, I'm right at the edge of the wild, are all these grasses, and I get to watch that cycle. And so they die down and they become this beautiful buff tan color, and their nodules of grass ripen, and the birds love them. But the whole plant's basically desiccated at this point. And I've watched that, and I've said to myself, what's going to happen in the spring? Well, I got to watch it this spring. The rains came, and luxuriant new grass came up. And then in about a month, up comes the shoot of the fruit of the wheat part of it, of the little kernels that are going to come off the grass. And now they're just beginning to dry out and be ready. So this is the cycle of all of lives. It's ongoing, it's eternal, and it's happening not right now, not after you die. See, that's a mistake we make. Because right now, the cells in your body are not the ones that were there 7 years ago. You've already died and been reborn, countless times. How many of you could say you've lived several lifetimes in this life? Distinctly, for sure. We've already died and been reborn. Nothing about that's going to be different, only we're going to leave these bodies behind and go back to that beautiful source of oneness where we know who we are and what we are. But why wait? Why wait? Because one of the promises of Jesus is the kingdom of heaven on earth. And the way that quote is told in the Gnostic Gospels, the Gospel of Thomas, is that the kingdom of earth is everywhere, but few can see it. It's up to us to move our hearts into the joy of life, into the presence of life, like those dolphins and whales jumping in joy. They're living in the kingdom. They're not waiting for it. They're not hoping to die and go to heaven. They got it right now. Let's get it right now. That could be the message of our Easter right now. Move our hearts in joy. Move our consciousness into the good news that we're eternal, infinite, and one with that source who loves us profoundly. Profoundly. Each one of us. Just taking that all in, I'm going to invite you to close your eyes for a moment. Just breathing in this presence of life that's right here where we are. Knowing that it is flowing through each one of us. Such an infinite supply. The divine source has already said yes to us, has already given everything. The banquet, the feast of life is set before each of us. And I invite you to imagine yourself stepping into the banquet of life, seeing before you an ease of circumstances, seeing before you that the way is made clear, and that every good thing that you need to fulfill your life's journey is supplied effortlessly with grace and love. Feel that you are surrounded by a host of loving, nurturing, supportive beings, showing up as family, friends, co-workers, strangers on the street, and that host of invisible beings who follow each of us and are here with us as well. And know that your ascent is taking place in perfect time. You are never late, you are never early, you are in perfect, divine, right time. And so I invite you to bow metaphorically in your awareness to that great source of life itself that has given all, that is supplying all, and that is welcoming you home to the truth of your being. And this Easter, we allow every ancient ancestor in our DNA to come forward and be with us now as we make the ascent into the full knowingness of the truth of our being, our oneness with all. And we fulfill the longing in the heart of all those who came before us. And we ensure the well-being, the health and the vitality and the knowingness of all those who follow us. So just breathe that in, knowing that you are doing God's good work just by being alive and making this ascent. You are on the path, and so it is.